In this video, we are going to be talking about conditionals in Python. Conditionals. Now, conditionals are an integral part of computer programming, not just in Python, but in several other programming languages. And now, what do conditionals do? So they allow you to execute a certain task provided that some requirements are met. So now, what do we mean in this sense? Let's say you go on a website and you have your password as well as your username in the database. So when you want to sign in, the website or the app asks you to enter your username and your password. So that username must correspond with the username in their database, as well as the password you you submitted must also correspond to the password that's in where that's in the database. So why don't we quickly do something like this? Let's say something like username db for database. Let's say the username for database, like in the database, let's say it's something like Lucas. All right, and then let's say the password, okay, the password, and then the password in db, let's say it's let's just say 12345 6. All right, so now this is what we have in the database. All right, so let's say database over here. So let's say database. So I'm going to take away these conditionals. All right, these are database. Now let's ask the user for input. So whatever you are saying with the hash, they are just mere comments. The computer does not treat it like code. All right, so now let's ask the user for their name. So let's say username and then equals to, we are using our input function, and then let's say something like username. All right, so this should be the equals to sign, and then username. Okay, and then also here we are asking for the password, and then we also say input, and then we ask them for their password. All right, that's cool. So now we want to set a certain condition. Let me show you this. Well, let's run python hello.py, enter. Oh, okay. Okay, username, let's say Bashir, let's say 123. All right, so nothing happens. Why? Because we are not printing anything. We are only just collecting the username and the password, but we want to validate the password as well as the username. So now what we can do, we can now set a condition using the if. So we are going to be exploring this we are going to be exploring this keywords if. Let me put this here: if, elif, else, and or we are going to be looking at equals. We are going to be looking at not equals, okay, lesser than, all right, greater than, all right, lesser than or equals to, all right, greater than and equals to. All right, I think there should be, okay, if, elif, else, and or equals, not equals to, greater than, lesser than. Okay, fine. I think this may suffice for this class. So now if is one of these conditional keyword that we use to set a condition. So let me show you. I can say, just like in English, if the username equals to the username in db. All right, so I want to print login successful. So I have said if username equals username in database, so it should print what? Login successful. So yeah, this equals to sign, it is a logical operator. So we are using it to compare two logic. Is the logic on the left equal to the logic on the right, and vice versa? Is whatever username that the user will give us, does it correspond to the value of this username in db, which is Lucas? Once it does, so Python will take that and then it's going to compare both of them. So once that is true, and then we have boolean, that's the data type which I'm going to explain later too. So once this is true, if really username is equals to username in database, so I am saying print login successful. Now you can see this indentation. It is 4 spaces or just 1 tab. All right. So now what that means is that once this is true, I want all of this to also what? To also be processed. So, but if line 12 is false, all from line 13 is going to be what? Is going to be ignored. So it's a property of this condition that we set. So let me save this with Ctrl S, and then let's run this one again. So now let's say Lucas. Okay, 1 2 3 4 5 6. All right, so this tells us login successful. Lucas, that means, oh, the username I provided corresponds with what? With the username that is in database. But let us now take a look at something else. What if I say Lucas, okay, username, let me say Bashir, and then password 1 2 3 4 5 6, enter. Now we can see that because the username wasn't correct, Python did not print anything. But then you have been on websites, you've used applications, all that, and then there are times you've gotten your wrong username or password wrongly, and then the software tells you that, oh, that is not correct. So that means we cannot just only catch just this what if this is true. We can also set a condition that what if username is false? What if it is not correct? Well, we can also say we can say if username is not equals to username in DB, so we want to print login field. Let's do this. All right, enter this. So let's use Bashir again. Enter 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now it is telling us login field, but now this here is bad logic. It's bad design. Why? Bad design because we are like repeating. Now, as long as username is not equals to username in database, we can just conclude that it is actually false. So we don't have to repeat this condition. Username can either be can either be the same as username in database or it is not. So that is where the else comes into play. We just have to say, well, if the username equals to username in DB, print login successful. Else, you can just say else, and then we want to print what? Login field. So that means this here is not necessary. So we don't need to set 2 different types of conditions for this. We can only say as long as username is not the same as username in database, the only logical conclusion is that what? Is that it is not correct. So we can say instead of login field, we can say login field, and then username is not correct. All right. So which tells the user that, oh, that means there has been a what? There has been a problem. So 1 2 3 4 5 6. All right. So it tells us login field username is not correct. Now this is cool, but there is something else here. Now what we have not explored is what if. Let's take a look at this. So what we have not explored over here is a second. Okay. Is we are only checking for the username. We are not checking for the password. Meaning if I do something like this, let me do something like this. Okay. So let me say, well, if the username here is correct, but the password 0000, it still tells us login successful. Meanwhile, I have inputted what? A wrong password. So we are not only going to check for the username, we also want to check for the password. And how can I do that? Are you thinking maybe I should write if password equals to password DB? I may not need to do that. I can change these conditions. I can set them together. I can say if username equals to username in DB. Now we have another keyword for conditionals, which is the and then I can say and password okay, password, anyone could be equals to password. All right, if the password in database equals to password, I can also swap it and say password equals to password db. Doesn't matter. So if username equals to username in db, and password equals to password in database equals to password, I want to print login successful. So here I can now make it make this more intuitive. I can say login failed, wrong username or password. As a matter of fact, I can also set my condition in such a way that it tells you whether it is the username that was wrong or the password. So we do this now. So let's now do this. Let's get the username correctly. Let's say it's Lucas. Let's get the password correctly. 1 2 3 4 5 6. Now that gives us login successful. So let us make this fail. So let's say username is wrong, Bashir, password is correct, login failed. Good. So why don't we do this again? So let us also say something like Lucas, and then let's say the password should be wrong, 0000. Now you see it tells us login failed. So that is going to introduce us to the truth table. So the truth table of and or. This is and. We have and. We can also use or. We can also use or. But there's a difference between and or. You can say I have it here and or. So in what conditions or situations can you use or, and when can you use and? You are using and only when you want to make sure that strictly this logic here on the left corresponds with the logic is true. If this comparison is true, and this comparison is also what is also true. But for or, both of them don't have to be true. It's optional. The left could be right and the right could be wrong, and vice versa, but both of them cannot be wrong. So let me give you an example. We are using or now. So let me say Lucas, that is correct, but let me do wrong password. It tells me login successful. Why? Because I said if username equals to username in database, or password in database equals to password, as long as username is true, that means we don't even bother to check about the password in database. I can also do something like this. Let me call this Bashir, and then let me make the password. So the username is wrong, but the password is correct. It tells us login successful. The only time the or is going to give us something false or wrong will be when we say, let's say Bashir, and then we say 0000. Now it tells us wrong username or password. So the truth table for and, let me give you something like a truth table here. Let me just do this. All right, so this also is one way of making a comment. Anyway, we are going to get there sometime. So let me say the truth table for and is if what's on the left, if the left is true, right, and right, that is the logic on the right, is true, so it is going to give us what? True. So if the left is false, so let me use false, and then the right is true, so this is also going to give us what? True. Okay, for and, this is going to give us false for and, right, because both of them must be the same. And then if the left is true and the right is false, right, so this one is also going to give us what? False. So if the left is false and the right is false, so this is also going to give us what? False. So when you're using and for the comparison, it is only in one reality that you can have a true result, and that is only when the left and the right logic are what? Are true. Otherwise it will give you false. But for or, if the logic on the right is true, and then the logic on the right or the left is true, right is true, it gives you true. But if the left is false and right is true, it will still give you true, because we just want only one to be true. If left is true and right is false, it gives you what? True. It is only when they are false, left is false, right is false, that is the only time or is going to give you false. All right, so now let's get this. So we have done if, else, and, or. Now another thing that we may need to explore, we've done equals equals, okay? So we can also use not equals to, which we have. So we also have very importantly here, let's quickly take a look at this other one. So we can also set a condition. Imagine I want a student, or before even that, we can do something like this. So let's say score 1, and then let's say it should be the int. Let's convert this into an integer, and then let's say input, and then let's say something like score. All right, so let's do the same thing here. Let's just copy this, and then let's do this as well. So this is going to be what, score 2. And now we can do this kind of comparison with integers. So this comparison only works with integers, actual real numbers. So we can say if score 1 is lesser than score 2, so we can say print score, let's use our f string. Okay, let's just say score 1 lesser than score 2. Now because these are numbers, so there are 3 things that could happen. It can either be lesser than, greater than, or equals to. We can now also say something called the Elif. So the Elif stands for else if. I am making sure that only one of these conditions can be correct. So let's say else if score 1 equals, or let's say something like greater than, let's use greater than. All right, score 2. Okay, so we can do something like print score 1 greater than score 2. So now what is the third condition? The only thing that could have happened again is if it is not greater than, if it is not lower than, it can then be what, equals to. So we don't have to say Elif score 1 equals score 2. We can just terminate the logic. Well, if it is not lesser than and it is not greater than, else. So that means we have come to the end of our condition. You can just say else, print. So we can do this. We can print score 1. Okay, score 1 equals score 2, and then so let's do something like this. Let's run this, and then let's say this is 60, and then this is 45. So score 1 is greater than score 2. Why don't we do something like this, 45 and then 60. We can see score 1 is lesser than score 2, and then let's do 50 and then 50 as well. Now score 1 equals to what? Equals to score 2. We can also use this lesser than or equals to, or lesser than or equals to, greater than or equals to. But before I do that, let me also make this Elif kind of a little bit clear. All right, so let me do something like this. Let's say market, and then I'm going to be using list. So a list is a type of data structure, but we are going to be exploring that in some later classes. So let's say egg, let's say meat. All right, meat. Let's do something like cheese, and then let's do something like let's say something like chicken. I'm just going to use that anyway. So now here I now want to set a condition. Say if there is egg, right? If there's egg in market. All right, so we have also not used in. So the in is used to try to check if something exists in something like a list like this. So if egg is inside this market variable, all right, we want to print, we want to tell this person to like buy what? Buy egg. Now we can also say maybe if, look at this, we can say if meat in market, if meat is in market, and then we also want to say, let's print some what? Buy what? Buy meat. All right, and then we now also want to say let's just say else, where if it doesn't find egg or meat, let's just say print, and then let's say what, go home, or let's say come home, for example. All right, so now let's look at this. Let me run this code. Now you can see there is buy egg, there is buy egg and then buy meat. Why? Because both eggs and meat are in the market. But what if I want to ask this person to get just one item? I'm not asking them to buy both egg and meat. I want them to buy the first thing that they get to see. If egg was the first thing you saw, you buy it. If it's what meat, then buy it. Cheese, buy it. Chicken, buy it. But don't buy two. Now that is where Elif now makes some sense. So it allows you to write your conditions in such a way that only one condition can be true. So if I now change this one, Elif, if to Elif, now you can now see what's going to happen. Instead of printing buy egg and buy meat, it now prints buy egg. Because Python is going to check the first condition that you set. If egg in market, print buy egg. Python goes here to check for egg. Oh, it sees egg, and then Python automatically terminates what? Terminates the program or terminates the logic or running these conditions, and then it will probably go as well. So this is now chained together. So that means it's either this is true, or 7 is true, or what? Or 9 is true. So if I turn this on to, let's say something like fish, let me run this. So let's do this here now, and then you can now see buy meat. Why? If egg in market, there's no egg, it goes ahead to check with, oh, there's meat, and then so that is where Elif becomes very what? Very important and useful. So let's take a look at greater than or equals to horizontal that. So let's say a student, we are asking a student for their score, and then we say let's convert this to integer, and then let's say impute. So let's say score. Now we want to build our grading system. Let me make a comment, and then let's call this one grading. All right, so grading. So now we now want to set conditions. We know we want to set A, B, C, D. So let's do something like this. So let's say if this score, all right, is greater than or equals to 90, let's just do that. If it is greater than or equals to 90, so let's do something like print. Let's call this one grade A. So that means as long as the score is either 90 or greater than 90, we can write a better code that we also make sure the score doesn't get to be above 100. So we can do that. We can actually do that. So, but we're not going to be doing that in this class until when we get to loops and exceptions. So if score is greater than or equals to 90, print grade A. How then do we print grade B? I can say Elif, this score, if it is lesser than or equals to, let's say something like if score, we can do something like, okay, well, we are trying to look at this grade, right? So we can say if this score is greater than or equals to 80, if it is 80 or greater than 80, and the score is lesser than or equals to what? 89, then we want to print grade B. So what this means here is that we are trying to tell the student that if the score is greater than or equals to 80 and the score is lesser than or equals to 89, so that is what? Grade B. So we have used this logic to make sure that the condition for grade B stays within 80 and what? And 89. We can also repeat the same thing, and then we can say if the score is greater than or equals to 79, right, and then this score is lesser than or equals to what? 90. So we want to do what? We want to print, and then let's say grade C. All right, let's just stop there. You can just say else, terminate everything, and say print failed, for example. Failed. All right, so if we run this now, let's do this. Okay, the score, let's say it's 95, that's grade A. Let's say it's 84, grade B. Let's say it's 73 or 77, that is now it tells us, okay, now I made a mistake here because this is if the score is greater than or equals to 70, right, and then lesser than what, 79. All right, so that was a mistake there. 79. All right, so let's see what 77 will give to us over here. 77, enter, and then gives us grade C. But if I do something like 64, that tells us what, failed. So those are the basics of conditionals in Python. You can make more researches to explore more, so because there's way much more to even conditionals than what we have covered in this video. Subscribe to this channel, and I will see you in the next video.